The president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has begun, and you may have seen this in the press, seizing land from his own citizens without compensation because they are the wrong skin color. That is literally the definition of racism. Nothing to see here, says Mike Pompeo's State Department. It's totally okay for South Africa to steal property for racist reasons.
While Donald Trump continues to receive briefings on international affairs from his de facto state-run media, Fox News, after Tucker Carlson repeated a white nationalist myth of genocidal campaigns against white farmers in South Africa, Trump tweeted the word Africa for the very first time in his presidency in defense of those white farmers. Trump tagged both Carlson and Fox News in a tweet that asked his Secretary of State to, quote, closely study the South Africa land and farm seizures and the large-scale killings of farmers. And again, neither of those things are actually happening. Joining me now is Rick Wilson, Republican media strategist and author of the New York Times bestseller, Everything Trump Touches Dies, MSNBC political contributor Jason Johnson, and Tim Wise, anti-racism educator and author of White Like Me. Thank you all for being here. Tim, I have to tell you, it was shocking to hear Tucker Carlson go off on this sort of tirade, this sort of, that is kind of the basis of the white genocide hashtag about South Africa, supposedly this genocide against white farmers. It is one of the sort of hallmarks of what you heard, for instance, from Dylan Roof, right? That this notion of Rhodesia needing to be resurrected, or South Africa being South African whites being massacred. But for the president of the United States to then retweet that, did it shock you as much as it surprised me? And I've lost the capacity for surprise.
Well, I mean, nothing shocking. The dog whistles get louder, and this one is loud enough that the original Lassie could hear it, and the original Lassie's been dead since 1958. So that tells you a little something. I mean, here's the thing about this. Let's understand, this is not necessarily a new iteration of Trump's white supremacist rhetoric. This is something that has been going on the right in various segments of the right for a very long time. Go back to the early the 2009-2010 debates around Obamacare. People like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, when they were still relevant, were on the air talking about how, health care reform was really just a backdoor way to get reparations for slavery. And at one point, Limbaugh said that Obama's political mentor was Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, and that Obama himself was likely to start confiscating white farms here in America. So this is part of a long-standing tradition whereby right-wing folk, in this case Trump, is trying to glom on to what Jody David Armour at USC Law School calls negrophobia, the fear of black and brown folks paying back white people for the history of racism. So ultimately, I don't see this tweet as being about South Africa at all. I think it is a way to try to scare white Americans, not of black South Africans, about whom they don't think very much, but of black people here in this country. It's all part of a larger political process.
But Rick Wilson, there's always been a fringe. There is a fringe. It just is part of, life on the planet. But that kind of talk about, hashtag white genocide used to be 4chan stuff. It used to be on the, in the fever swamps. The idea that it's on the most popular media outlet of conservatives and of rank-and-file Republicans, and then coming out of the official Twitter account of the President of the United States, that is actually a change, no?
Look, this is a president who appeared on InfoWars. And, you've got idiots like Breitbart and Gateway Pundit credentialed with White House press credentials. So they not only want this sort of crazed conspiracy stuff out there, they welcome it. They're a part of it. They promote it every day. This is a president who had a guy who was a QAnon conspiracy theorist in the Oval Office for a picture 2 days ago. It doesn't surprise me. Like you said, we've sort of lost the capacity for shock. But in this particular case, the dog whistling is as loud as an air raid siren on this one. And it's sort of, one person speculated the other day that this is Donald Trump preparing for some real trouble and wanting to keep the hardest the hardcore of his base. And those are the guys that, like the pointy white hat crowd.
Yeah. And just to get some truth into the matter, Patrick Gaspard, who's the former U.S. ambassador to South Africa under President Obama, on Thursday tweeted, the president of the U.S. needs political distractions, to Rick Wilson's point, to turn our gaze away from his criminal cabal. And so he's attacking South Africa with a disproven racial myth of large-scale killings of farmers. This man has never visited the continent and has no discernible Africa policy. The official South African government tweeted, South Africa America totally rejects the narrow perception which only seeks to divide our nation and reminds us all of our colonial past. We should point out that white residents, who are about 8% of the population, own 70% of the private farmland. And, Jason, let me edit myself here because I'm saying it's something new. It used to be actually that, white nationalism was quite open, right? That there was no reason to hide it. You could join a white citizens council. You could be a member of the Klan and be mayor or governor. It didn't really matter. There was a time in our history when that was normalized. So it is wrong to say that it's something new. It's something new in the modern era, however, for a president to speak or tweet this way.
Right. This has pushed things to a new level. I always talk about the fact that, like, George Bush didn't propose a Muslim ban after 9/11, but this president did, right? Like Trump's racism is a brand new extra hot sauce version of the bigotry that black people have been warning white America about for 100 years, and no one was listening to us. This is why, though, this tweet is so dangerous. One, it's this sort of racialized distraction that the right does, right? The day that we find out that Manafort's in trouble, Fox News runs a story about Molly Tibbetts. The day that other people have come forward and say, hey, we're going to flip on Trump, he starts talking about South Africa. But even more dangerous, that tweet actually damaged the South African rand. It has impacted the economy. And it's also to use the term dog whistle, it's not a dog whistle, it's a klaxon. It is a sign that this presidency is aligning itself with global white nationalists and white supremacists. This is the connection that's drawn between him and right-wing groups in Israel, right-wing groups in Italy, right-wing groups in Germany, right-wing groups in the UK. When the president of the United States says, of all the things that are happening in Africa, good and bad, we're going to be concerned about this particular issue, he's saying that this is a white nationalist development, this is a white nationalist policy, and that's where I'm trying to take this administration. It is a danger to the world when he tweeted that.
And Tim Wise, where does this go? What's the end game of playing this game on the right?
Well, I mean, for Donald Trump, the end game is probably simply to stay in power. But the end game for the country, and I agree with the previous comments, incredibly dangerous and for the world, because when you empower these reactionary forces of whiteness around the world that feel besieged because, oh, my God, we just discovered we're actually the minority on the planet. I know for years we've acted like we were the majority. We've suddenly discovered we're not. We have to actually share this planet and share this country with people who look differently. And when you have been used to being top dog all around the globe and in your own nation, and suddenly you have to share, it's very frightening, I guess, to people. It feels like oppression to have to engage in pluralism. So the future is going to be written by how we respond in this moment. Do we stand up and challenge this resurgent white nationalism as white folks, those of us who are white, and say not in our name, or do we allow it to continue? That's going to make the difference.
Or those who are Republicans.
Yes.
Why are they so quiet about this, Rick?
Look, the culture in D.C. right now of the Republican Party, the faction of it that loves Trump is smaller than people think, but the faction of it that's terrified of Trump's base and of Trump, tweeting mean things at them or Fox News turning on them is enormous. And so they are willing to swallow any humiliation, any problem, any issue, and including this one where they, if you ask them in private, ask them in good faith, what do you think about this? They'll tell you it's absurd, it's racially tinged, it's typical of Trump in every way, and yet they lack the moral courage to stand up and say directly into the cameras, this president is engaging in things that are overtly racial. This is a signal to some of the worst elements in our society, and it's ridiculous.
And lastly, Jason Johnson, we have to file this under things people of color cannot do anything about. This isn't on people of color to fix.
Yeah, I've always said, look, racism is ultimately, it's a white people problem. They created the problem, they got to fix it. I know people don't like to say that, but it's true, and that's what we have to understand in this country.
Wow, what a time to be alive. Rick Wilson, Jason Johnson, Tim Wise, thank you all for being here. I'll bring you, hopefully you guys can come back. And more AIM Show after the break.